All right. Hi, everybody. I apologize for the slight delay. We had some filming issues going on, but it sounds like that's as under control as it's going to be.
Yeah.
All right. So welcome to another Indivisible Sacramento monthly meeting. It is now September 2019. We've been at this for over 2.5 years now. And I see mostly familiar faces today, but one or two that I don't recognize. Is anyone who's new here wants to raise your hand? And if you want to, you're not forced to, then maybe introduce yourself and talk about what brought you here tonight.
So my name is Tiffany Montgomery, and I'm not here tonight because I'm a candidate, but because I've become a candidate for local office, I have started to become engaged with a lot more groups, and I went to a sister district event a couple weeks ago in Davis, and I thought there must be one here, and so I saw you guys, and so I decided to come because I have this kind of theory about karma that if I'm working for other people, it's going to come back to me. So I'm running for District 3 County Board of Supervisors against Susan Peters.
Yay!
Whoa! I don't know much about you, but I almost want to vote for you now. I don't live in the district, so.
Yay! I'll be at the back with business cards for anyone who wants to meet me afterwards.
Great. You know, we've always wanted to take more of an interest in local races here, so yeah, it would be great to hear a little more. So, anybody else want?
Hi, my name is Linda Paoli, and I'm active with the Sister District Sacramento. And I came because Phyllis asked if I could come because she's going to talk for a couple minutes at the end.
Anyone from Sister District is a friend of ours.
And I also actually officially said I want all the emails you send me. So.
Great.
I've already done that for a long time.
Perfect. The more the merrier. Anyone who's not on our email list, by the way, I believe we have a sign-up sheet back there. You can get on there. Also at our website, indivisiblesacramento.com, there's a spot where you can just click and join our email list. We send, usually it's just once a week with like a recap of what our events are and maybe some important things that we'd like you to call your legislators about. We don't spam you with emails, and we have never shared email addresses with anyone, and we don't plan to. So it's a pretty low risk venture to sign up for our email newsletter list. For anyone who's not on that. And we had a couple more. Does anyone else want to say hello?
Hi, I'm Joan Peterson. I just wanted to get proactive to make an impact. And I went to one writing thing already.
Wonderful.
Welcome.
Anybody else, or is that all the new people? Oh, hi there.
I've been to a few postcard parties. My name's Debbie Hollingsworth. And I just don't think we can survive another Trump administration, so that's why I'm here.
You are right. So welcome, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. And of course, welcome back to everybody who's been here before. It's great when people keep coming back. So I also wanted to ask for some, more audience or more member questions here. Has anyone made any phone calls lately to a legislator? Anything in particular you'd like to talk about that you called about?
Everything.
Everything. Is there one issue you talked about to a legislator this last month that you feel really
gun control?
great?
Yeah.
So you called? Did you call him last week, or did you do the text bot?
Well, Barra's mine.
Okay.
Barra, Kamala Harris, and of course Diana. Anybody that I could get on the phone, or I could send an email to, or I could send a text to, or I could send something to. Yeah, they got everything.
Great. So we're trying to really talk a little more about the outreach directly to the elected officials. That's kind of Indivisible's bread and butter, and I think it's probably more powerful when people hear that others in the group are doing it too, so that you don't think you're the only one calling. So and you have a.
So I don't remember, I usually email my legislator, so I don't remember the emails. But I do remember phoning Ami Barra's office when I heard that there's been another advance toward the whole impeachment inquiry in the House.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, get it done.
Yeah.
And he gave you a non-committal response, didn't he?
No, it's just a staffer. It's their job to record your response.
Right.
So the staffer did his job.
So he had a town hall a couple weeks ago. I'll talk a little more about that later on. But thank you for sharing your stories, and anytime someone has a story about something that they called about, feel free, raise your hand, and we'd love to hear about it. It's great to share. Yeah.
One of the things I don't think that we forget about, and I do, is that the current issues seem to slide in the background because of the immediacy of something that's happening right now. And what I'm finding is that I go back and revisit some of the things that I've said before. There's still cooking, and keep saying it, because if we don't, they're going to think we've lost interest.
Well, that's an interesting idea. Now, I wonder maybe as a group, and I'm just kind of throwing out ideas here. What if we picked an issue that maybe isn't as much in the news lately to kind of bring back and remind our legislators about? That might be an interesting idea, Susan. I think that's something we might want to try. So, yes.
Over the next week, there are going to be a number of meetings with legislators and elected officials, and it's all around a week-long week of global action for climate.
Was this for 350? Sacramento 350?
350, Sierra Club, CCL, a coalition of about 8 different environmental organizations. So I have flyers on the back table. So I'll be meeting with Steve Hansen, who is my council member. I'm going to be meeting with Kamala Harris's office and Doris Matsui's office all next week. And there are meetings with Ami Bera's office and with all of the other city council members, and there's going to be a meeting with Darrell Steinberg's office.
So Pat, these are open to anyone who wants to join?
They're open to anyone who wants to join them, in the website for identifying what the meetings are and when they're going to be are listed on the flyers that I have up there. It's all next week.
Do you want to send me an email about that too? And
I did yesterday.
Oh, okay.
And the links
Great.
are all on the website.
Okay.
They're all on the Indivisible Sacramento
Ellen's
website. So if
Ellen's
you're
checks her
interested
email
in
more
next
often than I
week,
do.
it's all there as of today. Yeah.
Great. So then I'll see if I can blast something out in the next newsletter about that too. So.
That'd be great. And one other event, which is as important as any of those, is on Friday from 12 to 1:30 at the Capitol building on the West Steps. Is going to be a very large rally for climate action.
Is this Arms Around the Capitol?
Pardon me?
Is the Arms Around the Capitol one?
It's a climate strike.
It's a climate action, climate strike that is being organized by a whole coalition of youth. And there are going to be, I think, 800 different events all around the globe. It's spurred partially by Greta Thunberg's actions a year ago. She's on a national climate action tour right now and has been demonstrating in front of the Capitol building. She's spoken to the UN, spoken to the media multiple times. If you have nothing better to do, and even if you have a lot of better things to do, check out some YouTubes recently from Greta Thunberg.
Great. Thank you for sharing. All right, we're going to move on to our featured speaker pretty soon here, but there are a couple things I'd like to ask from everybody. We need your help with a couple things. First is we could use some volunteers for tabling. Basically, this is one way that we really got the word out about our organization back at the beginning. It seemed like in 2017 there was a march every other week about something or other, and we would show up, instead of just walking with everybody, we would show up with a little card table and a couple chairs and then some clipboards and just talk to people about Indivisible and try to get the word out. So we'd like to do more of that again. And so as events are coming up, we're going to try to send people and have a presence at these things and pass out some information about Indivisible and just talk to people about what we do. So Peru is going to be sending around a clipboard for anyone who'd like to volunteer for tabling. We don't have a definitive time or any particular event. It's just we want to gather a list of people who might be interested in. It doesn't take a lot of special talent. All you have to do is be able to sit and chat with people. So
Not that you're not talented, I'm sure you are.
Oh no, I was just saying because I've done it before. So if I can do it, then I know it doesn't take any talent. All you have to do is just be friendly to people and just get the word out about our organization. So we'll send that out so that anyone who's interested can sign up. The next is an idea that came to us from Pat over here, is sending postcards to Rachel Maddow. She was one of the early, I would say, the first people who got the word out about our organization back right after the guide was written. Almost nobody knew about it until she found it and mentioned it on her show, and suddenly the Indivisible Guide had millions of downloads. So we thought it would be, or Pat thought it would be neat, and I think that's a good idea to send some postcards to her and see if she might want to come out and talk to our group sometime. Who knows what the odds are, but it doesn't hurt to try. We've got several.
From the area. I mean, her family's from the Bay Area.
Oh, we were just talking about that. I actually didn't know that before.
Yeah.
But sounds like so maybe next time she's home for Thanksgiving or something, she can.
You should get together like 5 of your chapters or something to say it would be David's.
I think
would
we
if
could
we got-
definitely put together a pretty big audience of Same with Leah Greenberg and Ezra Levin. We reached out to them, the founders of Indivisible. We reached out to them to ask them to stop here on their book tour, so I hope they will. So we could have some big names coming to talk to us pretty soon, and that'd be really great. So we have some postcards back there. They are pre-stamped by the United States Postal Service. They're not fancy, or they don't have any fancy pictures, but they're on the table back there. If everyone could please, Haru's holding them up so that everyone can see what they look like.
There's also colored pens back here, and you don't have to have a stamp. You just write the name on the front. I did an example card here, and then like a little message to Rachel here, and then back here.
So sometime before you leave, please make sure that you write Indivisible Sacramento on there somewhere so that she knows who this is all from, that these are all coming from Indivisible Sacramento. Just sometime before you leave tonight, we'd really appreciate it if you could fill one of those out. Okay. And so that's about it for what I have to talk about today. So I am going to get to the reason you're here, our featured speaker tonight, talking about an issue that is unfortunately in the news almost all the time nowadays, and that is gun violence. She came and talked to us a couple years ago, and just because this is such a constant need to do something about gun violence, we are really happy to have her back. Please welcome Becca Gonzales from the Brady campaign.
Thank you. It's great to be back, although it's not great that this issue has been going on for so long. I first became involved in the Brady campaign in the year 2000, right after the Jewish Community Center shooting. People remember that. Although I think the year before with a Stockton schoolyard shooting, that was something that really had weighed heavy on my mind, and I wanted to get more involved. So I got involved with Brady at that time. We had a big march in the year 2000, the year that they had a march in Washington, D.C., and we had a great march here in Sacramento. But I've been involved pretty much, off and on since then, but it's definitely an important issue to me. My co-leader, Amanda Wilcox, is the full-time volunteer lobbyist for Brady in Sacramento, and she does a fantastic job. She's been personally impacted as her daughter was killed in a rampage shooting in Nevada City, I think in 2001. So unfortunately, a lot of the Brady leaders do have that kind of story. So it's a very committed group of people, and we've been working on this issue for a really long time. Let's make sure I do this right there. So Brady works in 3 ways. We work in the Congress, courts, and communities. We litigate. We try to make changes in the gun industry. In Washington, D.C., there are lawyers that work for Brady, and we look at what we call bad apple gun dealers, which are gun dealers that have no ethics, that knowingly sell to straw purchasers that they know are going around and selling the guns to other people. And they have been very successful in this campaign to shut down some of the most unethical gun dealers across the country. We also think educating and changing the gun culture is really important, and just letting parents, especially as one group of people, know what they can do to make their families safer. One of our campaigns is the Ask campaign, and that is encouraging parents to ask other parents before their kids go over and play, is there a firearm in the home? Is it loaded? Is it locked away? How is it stored? And I think as parents, sometimes we feel really awkward asking those questions, but we ask those questions about other things, like backyard swimming pool. I mean, is it secure? Can the kids get in? You know, we should be concerned about loaded firearms because those accidents happen. And so that's a really important campaign we have. Also, End Family Fire, which is a newer initiative of Brady, which is really getting at safe storage laws. So much of gun violence, you know, it's what you usually think about, the mass shootings, the day-to-day gun violence, but it's also suicide. I mean, the suicide rate is horrendous, and when people use a gun to commit suicide, they're usually successful. If you try to do another method, they're not always successful. You have a second chance of life. And so End Family Fire is talking about, if you have guns in the home, you have to store them safely. If you have somebody in your house who's really depressed, maybe you should get rid of that gun. It's not such a great idea. So those are two ways we work to educate the public. And third, we legislate. We have been really active. I mean, we're active nationwide, and Brady is really the only group that's passed legislation nationally that has had a lot of impact, and that was the Brady background checks. And if folks remember, Jim Brady was Ronald Reagan's press secretary when there was the attempt on his life. He got shot in the head, and Jim Brady and his wife Sarah founded this organization. And they did pass background checks, although you know they weren't perfect. There were some loopholes, but in California we worked really hard to close many of those loopholes. And so we are the chapter in the nation that's the most involved in legislation. And that's really because of my co-leader, Amanda, who's really dedicated her life to working on this, and her husband, actually. Both of them have been really active. And they've passed about 80 bills in the California legislature dealing with gun violence. And so, you know, I can't say enough about her and what we owe to Amanda and Nick. So we always talk about the tipping points in Brady. When are things going to change? You see a picture of Sandy Hook up there. You see the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, Texas. San Bernardino, Orlando, which had a huge tally there, and Las Vegas. And it really, I mean, there are huge events that I think that Sandy Hook especially was so difficult for so many of us, and it really brought the problem of gun violence to the forefront of people's consciousness. And I've worked, before I worked for actually I don't work for the Brady campaign, I volunteer for the Brady campaign. I worked for the state legislature for a number of years, and when I started in the late 80s, even with the Democratic Party, the prevailing wisdom was, you don't have your candidate talk about gun issues because it's a loser for us. We lose seats this way. I mean, everybody said that, you know, Al Gore lost because of guns. This was what folks really said and believed. And I would say even when I started my most recent position, I worked for the National Association of Social Workers, I heard a colleague who still believed that, and that was like 2009. But it has changed so much. I mean, if you watched, and I bet you many of you in the room watched the debates, the Democratic candidates were all taking this on. We're not afraid of this issue anymore. We know people care. And I do think attitudes are changing and people realize it's a huge problem. There's a lot we can do to make guns, you know, safer, short of getting rid of them, which, you know, would be fabulous, but but there's a lot of things we could do to make it better. So I think there have been a lot of those tipping points. Two other turning points were Parkland. Getting the young students involved did so much to energize this movement. Like a lot of movements, people who were older, retired, have been the ones who've been working on this for many years. And Parkland was so inspiring for so many of us. And I think the students really connected what happened with election campaigns and getting involved in politics and getting students to register to vote and really speaking about these issues. We had a rally a few weeks ago after the 3 shootings we just had, and we had a young student from Team Enough, which is an offshoot of Brady. He was just fabulous, and I think the crowd really enjoyed his energy and his enthusiasm for getting something done. And then the other magazine cover really represents the last 3 shootings we had in Gilroy. Gosh, I can't even remember them anymore. The one in Ohio, the one in El Paso. Yes, and that's when we had our rally. We actually pulled together a rally in 7 days. I was so amazed we were able to pull the rally together in 7 days, and it actually was a very good event. But I think it's too much. I think it's enough for a lot of people, and I think things are changing. Also, another thing I wanted to say is after some of these shootings, there are many other groups that were formed. We do work together. Some have their own special niche, but after Sandy Hook and Gabby Giffords after her incident, she has Giffords Law Firm. We have the moms. Many other groups work together. And then also after Sandy Hook, Obama really took a leadership position. If you remember when he was, I think he was in the Oval Office, and he made that very impactful, very emotional speech, and he put out a series of executive orders, which I think Trump has reversed, but it really had pushed the leadership on this issue, and it was great to see that at a national level. And I'm also just really happy to see that the Democratic Party is not telling candidates to stay away from guns anymore. And it's not just politics, it's also businesses. You may have seen recently that Walmart, Kroger, CVS have all said you can't have open carry of guns in our stores, which sounds kind of nuts. You cannot do that in California anyway. We have you can't open carry in California, but other states you can. So they finally decided, well, yeah, maybe that's a bad idea. Walmart also wants to limit ammunition purchases. And one thing that hasn't really had a lot of attention is that NASCAR is no longer allowing ads for military style or assault weapons, which is really, I think, great. It's great because I do think that's, a certain constituency there. And 150 business leaders have signed a letter telling Congress to take action on guns. So I think getting businesses behind us is really important. This wasn't really part of my presentation, but I'll add it in. Of course, the NRA has been one of our main foes all these years. And, people, I think this group knows that the NRA is really controlled by the gun industry. 30 years ago, the NRA was really much more of a hunting organization. It was low-key. It wasn't overly political. Leadership changed. The big money came in, and they're in the business of selling more guns. And they were really pushing the narrative that if you want to be safe in your home, you need to have a gun. That has been ongoing, although as you've seen recently, they have lost some power. They've had some issues in the organization, and so that is encouraging. But it really is a corporate gun lobby frame that we're fighting, much as it's not the same thing, but tobacco. I mean, it was big tobacco money, it's big pharma money, and it's the gun industry money. Did I do that? This one? Oh.
You went back. See you.
Okay, so you may have heard that last week the House Judiciary Committee passed a number of bills, 3 gun safety bills, extreme risk protection orders, which are sometimes called red flag laws, keeps guns away from people who are a threat to themselves or others. So this is a law so that if someone has, they're showing signs of violent tendencies or that they might act out, a relative, California actually is a little different. There's a bill to expand it to coworkers, could go to law enforcement and have guns temporarily taken away from their loved ones. This has been particularly effective for people who are suicidal and their family members are concerned. The law was first passed here in California, and it was after the Santa Barbara shooting. That student's father was really concerned about his son. He knew that he was, saying things on Facebook. He was very upset. He was showing violent tendencies. He tried to do something about it, but he didn't have the tools to stop that shooting. And he was actually driving over there at the time to try to intervene. So that's where an extreme risk protection order could really be helpful. This one probably seems to have the most momentum nationally, where members of Congress, even conservative members of Congress, have shown some interest. Although, I mean, I think we all have some amount of mistrust as far as sometimes conservative members show an interest initially and then they get scared away by the gun lobby. But Amanda, my co-leader of this group, she actually was asked to speak before a U.S. congressional committee about extreme risk protection orders. And as usual, she did a fabulous job, and Lindsey Graham even spoke to her afterwards, and he said that he thinks we can get this done. Whether that'll happen or not, I do think he was impacted by her words and what she said. And so those are very important bills. Keep Americans Safe Act to ban high-capacity magazines, which of course are used in mass shootings to kill the most people in the shortest amount of time. And Disarm Hate Act bans people convicted of hate crimes from getting guns. So I think that's all very important. The House is taking the lead. I think all of you in this room have been paying a lot of attention to the elections and how we won all those congressional seats, and this is, you know, the difference that we have seen in the House anyway, that we have been able to pass laws. It's what leadership looks like, but Senator Mitch McConnell, it's his move and it's in his court, and he has been the one that has been blocking everything. And then, you know, also, this isn't on the slide either, but we've also seen how Trump has responded to these gun issues, which is how he responds to things a lot of times. He just says something off the top of his head, which really maybe is how he actually believes that he is a little concerned, and he thinks it's a little, you know, nuts that it's like this and we have all these mass shootings. But then, I mean, the way I say it, daddy calls, you know, NRA calls, Wayne LaPierre calls and gets his ear. And I wish the media and everybody would hold his feet to the fire more on that and call it what it is. I mean, he is a puppet, and it is daddy calling. And I feel like daddy calls, and then he changes his mind, and then he says something differently. So I am very discouraged by that, but I do have a lot of hope for the future. Next week, the House Judiciary Committee is having a hearing on assault weapons. When the ban was in effect, there were 37% decline in gun massacres, 70% decline in assault weapons traced to crime. Dianne Feinstein had passed an assault weapons ban. I believe it was in 1989. It expired about 10 years after that. I saw a Facebook post just the other day that said, you know, the Second Amendment didn't die during the years we had an assault weapons ban. It's a reasonable restriction that we should be looking at. I would say it's probably the most controversial, though, of the three measures that I outlined before. And then universal background checks, of course. H.R. 8 passed the House last February, requires background checks for all sales and transfers of firearms, which is really what we have in California. The companion measure, the Background Check Expansion Act, that's waiting for a Senate vote. And as I said before, Mitch McConnell has turned the Senate into a graveyard for these measures. There have been a variety of polls about how the public feels about background checks. And I talked to Amanda today to see why she chose the 90% of Americans support background checks. She said that is the most commonly used statistic. But a recent, I'm going to say this wrong, Quinnipiac, how do you say that? Quinnipiac University poll, it released February 20th, 2018, 97% of Americans and 97% of gun-owning households support requiring background checks for all gun buyers. I called her after this and I said, was that a typo? I mean, I knew it was high, but I didn't think it was 97% and 97%. So that makes it even more ridiculous that we haven't moved on this. And so, just backing up a bit, the Brady campaign's core goal has always been to have very effective background checks and to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people. It was passed in '93, estimated that 1 of 5 guns sold have no background check. 3 million gun sales denied, though, since 1994, so it has been effective and blocks an average of 343 sales a day. So it has has been effective, but we need to, the gun show loophole, you could go to Nevada and, buy certain guns, bring them over state lines. So even though we have really effective laws in California, we really need national laws. And then also, in states with expanded background checks, the stats show that 53% fewer law enforcement officers are killed, 47% fewer women are shot to death by intimate partners, 53 fewer gun suicides, and cities in these states see a 48% reduction in gun trafficking. And then once again, there's that polling data. So there's so much evidence that background checks works. It's a great policy, and it needs to be stronger across the nation. One thing we always show in Brady, California, when we talk to groups, is that California has had a greater decline in firearm mortality rates than the rest of the country. So California is the blue line, red is the rest of the US. Crime in general has decreased since the 80s and the 90s, but our mortality rate because of firearms has gone down much steeper than the US. And in fact, from 93 to 2017, the firearm death rate decreased 55% in California and 14% in the rest of the US. Yes?
That mortality, is that suicides and
I believe it's everything. And so there are other factors that go into reduced gun mortality rates, such as better medical care, but that's only one factor. And so there are other factors that reduce that mortality rate, but just the fact that California is so much steeper than the rest of the nation, it shows the effect of the gun laws that we've passed here. Yeah?
Do the background checks include fingerprinting?
When they do their, I believe you do a fingerprint when you try to purchase a gun, because it is looking at crimes that they have committed. So certain crimes, certain felonies, you cannot purchase a gun.
And that goes both to FBI and CI&I here in
DOJ.
Yeah.
Yes. And then so in California, like I said, we have universal background checks. We have a 10-day waiting period. We retain records of all gun sales. And the reason that's important is sometimes people buy a gun and then they become prohibited. Like let's say they had a domestic violence incident. In California, our Department of Justice actually will send people to take guns away from people who become prohibited after they actually first bought the gun. Child access prevention laws have been in effect here for a number of years. You have to keep your gun away from children, locked, stored, so they can't access it. We regulate gun dealers and gun shows. We regulate ammunition sales. That is recent. That was after, there was a bill in the legislature, but Gavin Newsom also had his proposition on the ballot that included the ammunition sales. We do ban certain dangerous assault weapons, large capacity magazines, and ghost guns, which are guns that people can make on a 3D printer at home. Stronger prohibitions and restraining order laws. And so we have taken a lot of steps in California. There's always more we could do, but like I say, I think we really need to think nationally also. And then this last year, we had 15 bills. Right now we have 15 bills on the governor's desk. It's the period, as you know, where he's signing bills. The two priorities, SB 61, restricts semi-automatic rifle purchases to one gun purchase in a 30-day period and eliminates hunting exemption for semi-automatic rifle purchase by those under 21. This is an anti-gun trafficking law because people who are going and buying a lot of rifles at a time are most likely selling them to other people. And so this has been a law for a number of years on handguns, but now we're going for semi-automatic rifle purchases, which, as we say when we talk about this bill, it's not your grandfather's hunting rifle. It's a much different weapon. AB 1669, BONTA, this one is definitely more controversial because anything that raises a fee really gets people's upset, but it raises the fee on gun purchases to fund implementation and enforcement of our strong gun laws. We do need more money at DOJ to support these laws. It hasn't been raised since 2004. The fee has been $19 and it would go up to $32.19. So this will really test, I think, Governor Newsom to see whether he signs this bill or not. I do think he's committed to the issue, but it is talking about raising fees, which is always is tough for people. And then, I just want to talk about getting involved. The 2020 elections are coming up, we all know that. The last elections we gained 7 seats in Congress. I know many of you worked on those. Katie Porter eked out a victory in Orange County. It's very inspiring. And she, even got up and had a speech on the floor saying that she won her election standing up to gun violence. So we need more Katies out there. We need them in the U.S. Senate. But all the Democratic candidates, all 7 that won in California, actually talked about gun violence, and they ran on gun violence. So we have totally changed the narrative. And she also told the story about 2 of our chapter leaders that have been involved in Brady since before I was, Charlie and Mary Lee Bleck, whose son was living in New York City, dropped his date off at her doorstep, and then turned around and some kid with a Saturday Night Special, which is a very cheaply made handgun, shot him and he was killed. And since then, that's when Charlie and Mary Lee first got involved. And in California, we banned those Saturday Night Specials. They were so cheaply made that they could easily just go off, if you nudge them the wrong way. And they have still continued their advocacy to this day and have never stopped. And so it was nice that she paid tribute to them. Our Orange County chapter worked really hard to to get her elected, as did many of Indivisible chapters. And then just to wrap it up, on actions you could take, I have a little flyer in the back that's really this slide. Urge Mitch McConnell to act on gun safety legislation. We have a number you could text or call. Contact members of Congress to support the assault weapons ban. Join our chapter. We have a sign-up list in the back, and then it says text it up to get mobile updates, and urge Newsom to sign SB 61 and AB 1669. There's also a website, speakforsafety.org, which talks about the gun violence restraining order. We're trying to let more people know about this. I think because of the recent shootings, I think people are much more aware of these, sometimes called red flag laws. But we passed this in California maybe in 2016, and we feel that people don't really know about it, and they have to know about it in order to use it. My day job is that I lobby for the National Association of Social Workers here, and at our conference, there's a social worker who works for Giffords Law Center, and she's going to talk to social workers about getting the word out on this, because they do work with many people maybe who are facing domestic violence or violence in their communities, where a gun violence restraining order might help out. But really, ultimately, we need a new president. We need control of the U.S. Senate. But I think we have come so far. I mean, like I said, back in the day, we didn't even have the Democrats. And I do think we have the attention of the nation. People believe that there are many sensible restrictions you could impose upon guns to make our community safer. So are there any more questions in the back there?
So the red flag law that's been passed in California, are there any stats, any statistics on so far?
I think, oh gosh, I should have been prepared for that. I think that they have, there's like certain areas that have used it more because the district attorneys or whoever is down there has been more active. But I think it's been used about 200 times in California, which it could be a lot better, but it has been used, and we believe it's, saved lives.
Mom's Demand Action has been tracked. Mom's Demand Action has been tracking that.
Great. Yeah, I know we have that information somewhere.
Yes, I'm not
clear on this, but I thought I heard somewhere that you can't even really, from a public health standpoint, you can't even really study the effects of guns, that has been blocked.
It had been, yeah, they had blocked that for years and years, that the CDC could not study the effects of gun violence. But because it was political, the NRA had the voice of...
you can't use federal funds to study.
Right. They had the ear. They had the ear of the people in charge. But private studies have always been ongoing, at least. People might be familiar with Garen Whittemue at UC Davis. He does great research on gun violence. We have funded that in California. There was a bill a few years ago. Lois Wolk from Davis had a bill to fund an institute to study gun violence, and some of those restrictions have been loosened. But yeah, no, that is so ridiculous that you couldn't use, the federal funds.
Is your organization trying to overturn that? I mean, it's your state.
They have been working on the national level, but in California specific, we actually made it better by funding this center in California, so we had even more research here. The Brady chapters work together, but in general, the state chapters work on state legislation, and then we have some people in DC that are working at the national level. Although we do support what they're doing by having our members call their members of Congress.
One of the things that I've become aware of recently is that the cost of applying for a handgun permit is fixed, and so two things. It's kind of a double-edged sword. One, the county absorbs the cost, and so our sheriff gives out, he just gives them out like lollipops. And now the county has had to triple the amount of staff assigned to managing that process and reissuing gun permits for people, and we lose money on that because the state caps what we can charge. So I wonder if that's something, not because we want to charge more, but because we want to discourage people from doing it. But is that anything that you're going to
Kevin McCarty has had bills to try to increase those fees, and it wasn't successful the first year he did it, but that is something that he has been working on. You're absolutely right. Our sheriff here, Jones, is one of the worst offenders. I mean, he hands them out like candy. It didn't used to be like that in Sacramento County, but it is now. So yeah, they do not pay for themselves, and we need to drastically raise those fees. That's why I said that one bill that we have, our other priority bill, is going to be a real test for Newsom, because it is always really hard to pass those fee bills. Yes.
I have some very conservative relatives, and we have discussions back about this. One of the things they bring up a lot is about violent video games.
Right.
So, is there, what's your thought on that?
Well, my thought on that is that there are violent video games everywhere, not just in.
They say there are games out there that show you how to shoot in school. But they have them in other countries.
They have them in Canada.
So, I mean, I don't like. I personally, I don't think that's a great thing. I think that our gun culture is a little out there, but I don't think that's the cause of gun violence. Because when you look at other countries, like when people try to blame it just on mental health, people are mentally ill in Australia. They're mentally ill in Denmark. We have violent video games everywhere, but what we don't have is the mass amount of firearms that are just circulating in the United States. So it really always comes down to that.
And also for your relatives, contrast, I get into it over turkey. Contrast the statistics for California, where there are just as many violent video games as a different state.
Or in Japan, which is one of the highest use of video games and things like that, and theirs is, I think, the lowest in the world.
Right. And when you compare us to
because they do background checks that include a psychological evaluation.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think I saw that.
Yes.
So are buyback programs very successful at all?
It depends. We don't have a state buyback program. Sometimes in localities they've had a buyback program. I mean, you have to make sure you're not just circulating those guns out into the community again. Hopefully you're buying them back and you're melting them down and you're doing something. So there are mixed feelings about buyback programs. Some people they're very expensive, and I think some people think there are more other measures that can do just as much and maybe not cost as much. But, I mean, I'm not against them, but it's not something we have statewide in California. Any other questions? Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
That's that Katie Porter.
Katie Porter.
She's a Democrat that we
Yes.
supported. That sign to me sounded like she was in favor of gun violence.
Oh, okay.
And that the preposition that was in there was to add. Standing up. I hope they're not really showing that to
Thank you
you.
for pointing that out. That probably is a literal quote, but it's a, you know what I mean? She made a longer.
Yeah.
But I mean, they shouldn't show
I'm
that.
gonna change that to 2 gun violence.
Amanda's the one, she's the wizard behind everything, so I'll tell her that.
Yeah,
But,
good point.
You know, in the back though, like I said before, there's a half sheet of paper that has, you know, the one slide about actions you could take. We have a sign up for the Brady campaign to get our emails. And just like Indivisible, we don't spam you, we don't send a lot of emails. But when we have these quick actions, like this rally we had a few weeks ago, it's really great to get people out when we can. And so it might be an email list you might want to be on. We meet about once every other month.
On that sheet that you have.
Yes.
It says to urge Mitch McConnell to act on gun safety legislation. Now, I know when we've had previous speakers, they say contact your legislator.
He's not.
And if you're not in their district,
Right.
don't bother.
He won't
Right,
be
is this because he's the head of the Senate?
It's because
that
of
they
he's
would
head
take
of
our
the Senate.
call? They
Yeah.
would kind of tally?
Yeah, just
Who's
try.
calling?
I mean, you might initially, especially right after El Paso and all those shootings, it was hard to get through. I'm not sure what is, I would think it'd be a little easier right now to try to get through, but it is because he's the leader, and so we need to talk to him. But, you know, I think we need to keep up the vigilance, but I think that the real change is hopefully gonna happen in 2020. And then I think we have set ourselves up really well in changing the culture and changing the narrative so that we really can make a difference then.
Well, one of the things we have to remember, Mothers Against Drug Drivers.
Right. And so I think
it took
that's
a long time, but
right. And I think that's one of the public health campaigns that Brady looks at, and we model ourselves after them. Also, just making cars safer. You know, like we had seatbelts. We don't have, you know, we have bucket seats. We are making, you know, guns safer. Got rid of Saturday night specials. Try to make sure that people who aren't dangerous can't access guns. Making sure there are safe storage laws, etc. So we're using the same kind of model to prevent gun violence. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
So I heard a couple bills at the state level that we are being asked to support.
Yes.
SB 61 and AB 1669. They're both on the governor's desk, it sounds like.
Yes.
So you can call the governor's office at 916-445-2841. It'd be really great if tonight or tomorrow morning everybody called, probably tomorrow morning because I don't think they're going to be answering the phone.
No.
If everybody could just pick up the phone tomorrow morning and call the governor's office and urge him to sign SB 61 and AB 1669. So it sounds like 1669 is the most.
I think that's a heavy lift. I think that's the one that is really gonna show.
We need to.
Right. And I do have a flyer, a couple of things in the back that'll remind you of the numbers.
And so if anyone, I see some people writing things down and typing on their phones, 916-445-2841, that's Governor Newsom's office. So,
And
great.
Nate, I think it's also good if we say, you know, we're constituents, but also mention that we're members of Indivisible Sacramento.
Oh,
because there's a little more weight behind that, because you're speaking for yourself, but you're also speaking with the weight of the organization behind you.
That's a good point. I always try to mention that I'm a member of Indivisible. I say it properly. I say I'm a member of Indivisible Sacramento when I call, unless I'm calling a legislator that I think might hate Indivisible. But for the most part, I call Indivisible Sacramento. So yeah, it'd be really great to have every one of us, and you know you won't be alone because we're all going to be calling tomorrow. All right, just a couple other things that we want to talk about. So Ami Berra, I mentioned earlier, had a town hall, and I know a few people here. Does anyone want to raise your hand if you were at the? Okay, I know I thought I saw more than that, but
There were. They aren't all here like Regina.
That's
and
true. That's true. So
Tina.
what were your thoughts on that?
Well, I already came in mad
Yeah.
when I walked in the door, but I was really surprised that this was not the genteel discussions that he's had in the past.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we were very vocal actually.
I didn't know the previous ones had been genteel.
Well, except for the one where they pulled the fire, somebody pulled the fire button on one before. So that cut it real short.
What did you, either of you have any thoughts there?
We were really vocal, and a lot of people, not even just our group of Indivisible that were sitting together, but other pockets were around the room, were very frustrated with his specific resistance to the insistence about voting for impeachment, which was, his sort of dodge is just very consistent about. What was the specific?
He basically said in the end that only if Mr. Nadler
That's what it was. Yeah.
actually called and asked him specifically to vote.
Right.
That's when he would vote. It was
Yeah.
like, really?
Yeah, which is just not how those
No.
things work.
No.
So.
Yeah, I wasn't there, but I watched the live stream, and he also gave this insulting, condescending little talk about, the Senate isn't going to remove him. Like.
We are aware of that.
Yeah, we get it. It was pretty aggravating.
So
On one of the things we saw, I saw this thing that they had on MSNBC about they had interviewed one of the Republicans who just said, you never get into trouble doing nothing.
Yeah.
No, they have that on tape. And he said, you only get into trouble when you try to do something. I think that's what's going on.
That's leadership for you.
Yeah,
That's
really.
leadership for you.
So Indivisible as an organization is very much in favor of impeachment. According to I read in Political this morning, they have a little tally of this. 146 Dems out of 235 in the House have come out, either voted for an impeachment measure or said they're for it. 89 haven't, and Berra is one of the 89.
Yeah.
Actually, I will say he was actually pretty good when gun safety came up and gun violence came up. He was supporting a lot of the same measures that he talked about, but on everything else, he seemed to just be taking the weakest position he possibly could, and just the audience was overwhelmingly in favor of being a little more decisive and doing a little more. And I don't know, he comes from a district that went for the Democrat by 11 points in the presidential election, so it's not as if it's some sort of red
It's not
district
purple.
or anything.
No.
Yeah, it's
blue.
I actually came away feeling a little better. Not because we all vented, but just like, okay, we really got the message out there. There was no mistake.
If he didn't hear it, then
So I had an opportunity to talk with him one-on-one about 2 months ago at a very small event. I have to tell you, it was the best $100 I've ever spent. So if you have an opportunity to go to a fundraiser at a nice house and pay $100 and corner him, then I really recommend you do it. And what he was trying to communicate to me, I didn't necessarily agree with it, but what he was trying to talk about was this idea that if we get wrapped up in the impeachment, nothing else will happen. And I understand his logic, but what frustrates me, and probably other people as well, is that nothing is happening on the Senate side.
Anyway,
So if you were to make the argument that impeachment is distracting us and the Senate from doing stuff, then I might be willing to wrap my head around that. But this idea that would distract the Senate and we wouldn't get other things done, well, nothing's happening in the Senate anyways. And so I think I wanted to share that, because if you have another opportunity to give him feedback and kind of that's his thing, then you could say to him, nothing's happening in the Senate, so us doing something on the House side isn't going to slow down anything. So.
And more importantly, the impeachment would actually stop Trump from getting things done, because he'd have to prepare some sort of, his administration would have to prepare some sort of response and defense. And, if Mitch McConnell's forced to spend a couple weeks holding the trial, even if he's going to acquit him, That's 2 weeks that he can't spend ramming through a bunch of conservative judges. So why not? What is there to lose? I mean, if this guy doesn't deserve to be impeached, then really nobody who has ever held public office.
Just by Putin over. Right.
Anyway, so absolutely, and we're gonna, we'll make it happen one way or another. If we're gonna try to get this impeachment going, and then next year we got our chance to knock him out. But so our other area representative, Doris Matsui, is in favor of impeachment, although interestingly she hasn't been holding any town halls lately.
I didn't notice this.
We hear about it, by the way, if you have some more time, Doris Matsui's phone number is 916-498-5600, and we'd love to have her hold the town hall sometime, and she's actually on our side on a lot of issues, so we wouldn't have to yell at her on a lot of things, but it would be great to hear from her and have some sort of town hall. So now I will turn it over to our friends from Sister District, who just have some announcements to make.
We're all orchestrating. Hi, I'm Phyllis, and I'm the district captain with Sister District Sacramento, and I know a lot of you and talked to you before. But if anybody doesn't know what Sister District Project is, we've got about 76 teams across the nation. We sister, it's not just for women, we sister with with swing districts to try to elect Democratic state legislatures. We only deal with state legislatures. That's our focus. And also to hold vulnerable blue seats. So there's a brochure in the back. Linda's got stuff back there. There's all sorts of information here, including the 6 planks that any candidate that Sister District supports must support, including common sense gun violence resolution, including recognizing climate change, woman's right to her body, essentially. So that's all in here. But what I really want to sort of push tonight, if possible, is a little bit of fun. So we're supporting Karen Mallard in the state of Virginia. They had general elections this year. She's running for the House of Delegates. And we're trying to do some fundraising for her. So there's this handout in the back if you want to pick it up, what we're doing on September 29th. And Julie said I could say it's at her house. So no, Julie, it's at her house.
So it'll rock.
And we're going to play bunco. Never played bunco in my life, but I understand you roll some dice and drink some wine and have a good time, and that's what bunco's about. And we'll also have a silent auction. The cost is $25. It goes through Act Blue directly to Karen Mallard's campaign. We're all volunteers. We don't touch the money. And Karen Mallard is also going to join us by Skype. And she did that at our last fundraiser. She is incredibly personable. She has a really fascinating personal story. And I think you would enjoy it, so I really encourage you to take a look. There's a little list here of all different ways you can sign up, and Ellen has it on the website. And we would love to have you there. And then October 13th.
And you can win money.
And you can win money. Oh, I forgot about that. Okay, so we have an anonymous donor who donated $200. And so your $25 goes to Karen, and you come and play bunco, and there's a pot of $200. And I think we've got on here how many different, there's about 4 different things. So you can just make your $25 back. And anyway, you'll meet fellow Sister District people, other people, fellow Democrats. It'll be fun, I'm sure. So really hoping to get people there. And then on October 13th, we're having an event in Granite Bay at a private home. Again, it's a $25 donation, goes to Karen Mallard's campaign. And we're having, Battlestar and the Blues Rocket. And they have a website. They sound pretty darn good to me, so we're gonna have a band. We'll take a little break and do a little fundraising, but it's gonna be, a fun afternoon of music and dancing and just sort of letting your hair down and having a good time. So I know asking for money is not always the most popular thing, but it costs a lot of money to run for
Yes, it does.
positions. Yes. And in Virginia, if we can hold the Democratic seats that are there and flip 2 seats in the Senate and 2 seats in the House, it will be a trifecta state. And it's a very important state, and trust me, the Republicans don't want to be caught flat-footed like they were in 2017, and they're pouring money in there like crazy. So please help us. It starts with states. This is last chance this year and next before redistricting occurs. And I would much prefer to have a Democratic legislature, which is like 34 of the legislatures in this country still do redistricting. If you want something to change in Congress, we need to change things in the State House. So come and join us and have fun. Come see Julie's house. Play bunco. So, and there's a sign-up sheet back there if you just want to write your name and your email address, and we'll send you info too. So, thanks. Thank you.
So it sounds like that Karen Maller fundraiser is a quarter of the price of Ami Vera, so it sounds like
Good deal.
Actually, whenever I hear about Virginia's legislature, the names always make me chuckle. It's the House of Delegates and like the Chamber of Butlers or something. They have weird names, but it's a really close thing. That's the one that literally came down to a coin flip last time, so let's do something about that. I want to remind everybody we have those postcards in the back, so before you head out, please do fill out a postcard. We'll send it to Rachel Maddow, see if we can get a couple dozen of those. And I have some hands going up, so I guess we're not going to leave yet. So
Pat wanted to say a few words.
Yeah, let me just remind you that on Friday at 12 o'clock on the west steps of the Capitol building, there's an opportunity to support young people who are taking an activist role with climate when most adults aren't. So they're courageous, they're learning how to be leaders, and we can support them and really make a statement worldwide, as other people do in so many other locations. So
What time did you say?
12 o'clock, west step of the Capitol on Friday.
Great. And then I'll go on that order.
I just wanted to highlight too, please pick up one of these little flyers that are kind of upcoming events, because there's a lot of canvassing already going on. So there's canvassing going on in District 4, but there's also sister district canvassing going on in District 10 already, and District 21. So there's already lots of hands-on stuff going on, and it's on here and on the website. And I also wanted to just remind people that in addition to the other postcard campaigns, we're running, Indivisible is running a postcard campaign, and it doesn't sound that sexy, but actually I think it's important. In District 50, which could be, that's the district where Duncan Hunter is, and he's been indicted, and he's probably gonna have to drop out, so it's this free-for-all for Republicans. And it's a place where we're doing a postcard campaign to get Democrats out for the primary, because if we don't, it could end up with two Republicans at the top of the ticket in the general. And you don't want that, because at the very least, you want Republicans to have to be putting money into that district. So we're doing postcard things where we remember that these California districts still matter. We flipped a bunch of districts in the primary in the midterms, but anyway, so the next one that I'm doing is on the 25th, and it's at the North Natomas Library at 7 o'clock, and we have light snacks, and we write and have a good time.
It's fun.
A little music,
Party atmosphere.
It's a little bit of party atmosphere, and there's and ours is one of many postcard campaigns sister districts doing. A lot, there's a lot going on, but just a little plug for why we're doing this seemingly strange postcard campaign in District 50. Yeah.
I was just going to mention another opportunity.
Oh, okay. So I'm done. I just want to make sure people get this little handout on upcoming events.
It's okay. Go ahead, and I'll get you next. I promise.
I'm sorry. So Sunday afternoons from 1 to 4 at the state Democratic headquarters at 10th and SN.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a writing opportunity, vote forward letters, flip the West postcards. You can come and write for many different campaigns and feel like you're with other writers. It's very encouraging.
And that is actually not sponsored by the state Democratic Party. It's sponsored by Sacramento Mighty Oaks.
Right.
Just so everyone, in case you feel uncomfortable working directly with the party, it's at the office, because that's who gives them the space. But it's the Sacramento Mighty Oaks that sponsors that.
Thanks for clarifying that.
I don't know how many of you are familiar with NorCal Recessed. They've been helping the families in the detention camps, and Monday a group of them went to CalPERS e-board to ask them to stop investing your retirement funds in
Yeah.
these camps. So if you want to call them or email them, you can find them on the web, the e-board members for CalPERS, which is the State Employee Retirement System.
Interesting, I didn't know that they actually were doing it. Do you know, we had NorCal Resist come talk to us last month, so they're doing some great work, but
They were there Monday, this past Monday.
so CalPERS is investing in
Yes.
the private prisons?
Yes.
Or in the-
Yeah, portions of the funds.
Wow.
Okay.
So the
That's
e-board,
terrible.
when they presented to the e-board, they said that they promised to consider the recommendation, but they did not commit. So the more they hear, I think, from the public, maybe put more
So
pressure on.
Probably especially if you're a CalPERS member, right? If you work for the
Exactly.
state or local government.
You don't want your monies going to that.
Got it. And then we got one more
Just
now?
a quick one. Capital Women's Campaign is hosting on October 26th a training for people who are interested in becoming more engaged in political campaigns, and so it's really a training if you want to become more experienced and to go work as a volunteer in a campaign. So you can find that on their website.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. Remember to do those postcards on your way out. It's been a great meeting. Thank